The lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast harsh shadows across the pre-op room as 24-year-old Maya Richardson stared at the consent forms in her trembling hands. The words high-risk cardiac surgery seemed to blur together as she tried to focus. Her heart, the very organ that was about to be repaired, hammering against her ribs with an irregular rhythm that had been her constant companion for months. "We'll need a family member to sign as your emergency contact," the nurse said gently, clipboard poised. "Someone who'll be here when you wake up." Maya looked around the sterile room, expecting to see the familiar faces of her parents, her older brother, maybe even her sister. But the chairs remained empty. Her phone showed 3 unread messages, each one a variation of the same devastating theme. Work was more important than being there for her surgery. What Maya didn't know in that moment was that waking up alone would be just the beginning of a journey that would shatter everything she believed about family, loyalty, and her own worth, but ultimately lead her to discover a strength she never knew existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Richardson had always been the family peacekeeper. Growing up in suburban Columbus, Ohio, in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, she was the one who mediated arguments between her parents, covered for her siblings when they got into trouble, and made sure everyone remembered birthdays and anniversaries. At 24, she still lived at home, not because she couldn't afford to move out, but because her family had convinced her they needed her there. "Maya's our glue," her mother, Patricia Richardson, would tell neighbors with a proud smile. "Don't know what we'd do without her organizing everything." Patricia worked as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, a job that required frequent travel and long hours. She was a woman who measured success in quarterly reports and client acquisitions, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, her auburn hair never out of place. She had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination, often reminding her children that sacrifice was necessary for success. Maya's father, Robert Richardson, was a construction foreman who had built his reputation on never missing a day of work in 23 years. He was a man of few words but strong opinions, believing that showing up meant everything. "Your word is your bond," he'd tell his children. "When you commit to something, you see it through." He wore his work ethic like a badge of honor, often working double shifts to provide for his family. Her older brother, Jake Richardson, 27, worked as a junior associate at a downtown law firm. He was ambitious and driven, putting in 80-hour weeks as he climbed toward partnership. Jake had always been the golden child, valedictorian, full scholarship to Ohio State, law review. He lived in a downtown apartment but still came home for Sunday dinners, usually arriving late and leaving early for important calls. Maya's younger sister, Chloe Richardson, 21, was a junior at Ohio State studying business administration. She worked part-time at an upscale retail store and had internship interviews lined up for the summer. Chloe was the social butterfly of the family, always juggling multiple commitments and social obligations. Maya herself worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency, a job she'd taken after graduating with a degree in visual communications. She was talented, but had always put her family's needs before her career advancement, turning down opportunities that would have required her to relocate or work longer hours. The Richardson family had always functioned like a well-oiled machine, with Maya as the essential cog that kept everything running smoothly. She managed the household calendar, coordinated family gatherings, and was always available when someone needed help, advice, or simply someone to listen. But beneath the surface of this seemingly close-knit family, there were cracks that Maya had chosen not to see. The first signs of Maya's heart condition appeared 6 months earlier, during a particularly stressful period at work. She'd been experiencing irregular heartbeats, shortness of breath, and episodes of dizziness that she initially attributed to stress and too much caffeine. When she mentioned it to her family, they dismissed it with casual concern. "You're young and healthy," her mother had said, barely looking up from her laptop during dinner. "Probably just anxiety. Maybe cut back on the coffee." Her father had nodded in agreement.
Your generation worries too much. Back in my day, we just pushed through. Even when Maya's symptoms worsened, when she had to sit down halfway up the stairs, when her heart would race for no reason, when she felt like she couldn't catch her breath during simple conversations, her family's response remained frustratingly dismissive. You should exercise more, Chloe had suggested while scrolling through her phone. I read that cardio helps with stress. Jake had been more direct. You're probably just out of shape. Maybe stop organizing everyone else's life and focus on your own health. The comment had stung, particularly because Maya had been helping Jake prepare for a major case presentation that very week, staying up late to format his documents and research citations. It wasn't until Maya collapsed at work during a client meeting that she finally sought medical attention. Her colleague, Sarah Chen, had insisted on driving her to the emergency room despite Maya's protests that she was fine. You turned blue, Maya, Sarah had said firmly. That's not fine. The emergency room visit led to a battery of tests, EKGs, echocardiograms, stress tests, and finally a cardiac catheterization that revealed the shocking truth. Maya had a congenital heart defect that had gone undiagnosed her entire life. The condition, called tetralogy of Fallot, had been compensated for by her body until recent stress and lifestyle factors caused it to deteriorate rapidly.
Dr. Amanda Foster, the cardiac surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital, had been straightforward but gentle in her explanation. You've essentially been living with a heart that's been working overtime your entire life, she said, showing Maya the diagnostic images on her computer screen. The defect involves 4 separate problems with your heart structure. Without surgery, your condition will continue to deteriorate. Maya had stared at the images of her heart, seeing the abnormal connections and malformed structures that had been silently shaping her entire existence. Everything suddenly made sense. Her exercise intolerance as a child, her tendency to get breathless easily, the way she'd always felt different from her more athletic siblings. How soon do we need to do the surgery? Maya had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Within the next 2 weeks, Dr. Foster had replied. This is a complex procedure, open heart surgery, that will take several hours. You'll need a strong support system during recovery. Maya had felt a wave of relief at those words. Finally, she thought, her family would understand the severity of her condition. Finally, they would see that this wasn't just stress or anxiety or being out of shape. She had called a family meeting that evening, gathering everyone in the living room where they'd shared so many important moments over the years. The room felt different somehow, smaller, more fragile, as she explained her diagnosis and the need for immediate surgery. It's called tetralogy of Fallot, she said, reading from the pamphlet Dr. Foster had given her. It's a congenital condition that means I was born with 4 separate heart defects. The surgery will take about 6 hours, and I'll need to be in the hospital for at least a week. The initial response had been what Maya had expected: shock, concern, and promises of support. Of course we'll all be there, her mother had said, reaching over to squeeze Maya's hand. This is serious. Her father had nodded gravely. We'll rearrange everything. Family comes first. Jake had looked up from his phone, his expression serious for once. Just tell me when, and I'll clear my schedule. Even Chloe had seemed genuinely worried. Oh my God, Maya, I had no idea it was this serious. Of course I'll be there. For a brief moment, Maya had felt the warmth and security she'd always associated with her family. They would rally around her, just as she had always rallied around them. The surgery would be scary, but she wouldn't face it alone. But as the days passed and the reality of the situation set in, Maya began to notice subtle changes in her family's behavior. The supportive comments became more conditional, more hedged with concerns about work schedules and prior commitments. The surgery's on a Wednesday, her mother had asked during dinner 3 days later. That's right in the middle of my quarterly reviews. Can't they do it on a weekend? Maya had explained that surgical schedules didn't work that way, that Dr. Foster had specifically chosen that date based on operating room availability and the urgency of her condition.
Well, I'll see what I can do, Patricia had said, but her tone suggested she was already calculating the professional cost of missing work. Her father had similar concerns. Middle of the week is tough, he'd muttered. Johnson's breathing down our necks about the Henderson project deadline. Even Jake and Chloe began expressing doubts about their availability. I might have a deposition that day. Can't you reschedule for the following week? I have 3 job interviews lined up. These opportunities don't come around often. Maya had tried to remain understanding. She knew her family worked hard, that they had important responsibilities, but a growing unease had settled in her chest. A different kind of irregular heartbeat that had nothing to do with her medical condition and everything to do with the dawning realization that her family's priorities might not align with her needs. The night before her surgery, as Maya lay in her childhood bedroom surrounded by the familiar comforts of home, her high school art projects still hanging on the walls, the stuffed animals from her youth arranged on her dresser, she had tried to push away the growing fear that tomorrow, when she needed them most, she might find herself truly alone for the first time in her life.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The morning of Maya's surgery arrived with an unseasonably cold October wind that rattled the windows of the Richardson house. Maya had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of her childhood home, the old furnace kicking on, the settling of wooden beams, the distant hum of traffic on Route 161. She was scheduled to arrive at St. Mary's Hospital by 6 a.m. for pre-surgical preparation, with her operation set to begin at 8 a.m. Dr. Foster had explained that the complex procedure to repair her tetralogy of Fallot would likely take 6 to 8 hours, depending on the extent of reconstruction needed. At 5 a.m., Maya made her way downstairs, her small overnight bag in hand. She had packed carefully the night before, comfortable clothes for after surgery, her favorite book, the small teddy bear her grandmother had given her when she was 7. She had also written letters to each family member, just in case something went wrong, sealed in envelopes that now sat on her dresser. The kitchen was empty and dark. Maya had expected to find her family gathered around the breakfast table, maybe sharing coffee and offering last-minute words of encouragement. Instead, she found a note propped against the coffee maker in her mother's precise handwriting. Maya. Had to leave early for emergency conference call with Tokyo clients. Will try to make it to hospital. Love, Mom. Maya stared at the note, reading it 3 times as if the words might somehow change. She had specifically asked her family to be ready by 5:30 a.m. so they could all drive to the hospital together. They had agreed to this plan just 2 days ago. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her father. Pipe burst at Henderson job site. Had to go in early to deal with an emergency. Will get to hospital as soon as I can. Stay strong. Maya felt her already fragile heart skip several beats. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where they had shared thousands of family meals, where she had helped her siblings with homework, where just a week ago they had all promised to be there for her. Another text arrived, this one from Chloe. OMG, Maya, I'm so sorry. Got call last night that they moved up my interview with Morrison and Associates to this morning. This could be my dream internship. We'll be there as soon as it's over. Sending love. The kitchen seemed to close in around Maya as the full reality of the situation hit her. Her entire family, every single person she had counted on, had sacrificed for, had organized her life around, had chosen work over being there for her surgery. Not one of them would be holding her hand as she was wheeled into the operating room. Not one of them would be in the waiting room, anxiously watching the clock tick by during the long hours of surgery. Not one of them would be there when she woke up, confused and in pain, needing the comfort of familiar faces. Maya tried to rationalize their decisions. Her mother's pharmaceutical company did operate globally, and emergency calls did happen. Construction emergencies were real. A burst pipe could cause thousands of dollars in damage. Jake's legal career was at a crucial point, and disappointing clients could have lasting consequences. Chloe was young and trying to build her future. But
As Maya sat along in the dim kitchen, these rational explanations felt hollow against the crushing weight of abandonment. She thought about all the times she had dropped everything for her family, the weekends she had spent helping Jake move apartments instead of attending art shows with friends, the vacation days she had used to help her mother prepare for important presentations, the social events she had skipped to drive Chloe to job interviews or help her father with household projects. The irony was bitter. Maya had spent so much of her life being indispensable to her family that she had never considered what would happen when she needed them to be indispensable to her. At 5:45 a.m., Maya called an Uber. As she waited by the front door, she looked around the house that had been her entire world. Family photos lined the hallway, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduations, vacation trips. In every single photo, Maya was there, usually in the background, making sure everyone else was positioned perfectly, smiling broadly at the camera. The Uber driver, a kind middle-aged man named Carlos, noticed her hospital bracelet and overnight bag. "Surgery today?" he asked gently as they pulled away from Maple Street. "Yes," Maya managed, her voice barely audible. "Family meeting you there?" Maya stared out the window at the empty streets of her neighborhood, at the houses where families were probably sharing breakfast, where parents were kissing their children goodbye for the day, where normal, loving support systems were functioning as they should. "They had to work," she whispered. Carlos glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his expression softening with understanding and something that looked like anger on her behalf. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. That's not right." The 20-minute drive to St. Mary's Hospital passed in a blur of morning traffic and Maya's racing thoughts. She found herself thinking about a conversation she had had with her college roommate, Jennifer, just a few months ago. Jennifer had been amazed by Maya's devotion to her family.
"Don't you ever want to live your own life?" Jennifer had asked, after Maya had canceled another girls' trip to help organize her parents' anniversary party. "This is my life," Maya had replied. "Family is everything." Now, as the hospital's imposing glass facade came into view, Maya wondered if she had been naive, if her definition of family had been one-sided all along. The pre-surgical process at St. Mary's was a whirlwind of paperwork, medical questions, and preparation procedures. Maya was assigned to room 247, a sterile but comfortable space with 2 beds separated by a curtain. Her roommate was an elderly woman named Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, who was scheduled for gallbladder surgery. Mrs. Hartwell's side of the room was filled with flowers, balloons, and a steady stream of visitors, her husband of 52 years, 3 adult children, and what seemed like dozens of grandchildren who took turns holding her hand and sharing stories to keep her spirits up. "Is your family coming soon, dear?" Mrs. Hartwell asked, kindly, noticing Maya's empty bedside table and the single chair that remained unoccupied. Maya tried to smile. "They're on their way," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. As the morning progressed, Maya underwent a series of pre-surgical procedures, blood work, final scans, meetings with the anesthesiologist and surgical team. Each medical professional asked about her emergency contacts, about who would be there during and after the surgery. "My family is coming," Maya repeated, each time with less conviction. Dr. Foster stopped by at 7:30 a.m. for a final consultation. She sat on the edge of Maya's bed, her expression serious but reassuring. "This is a complex surgery, Maya, but we've done hundreds of these procedures. Your heart defect is significant, but it's repairable. We'll be making several corrections, closing the ventricular septal defect, relieving the pulmonary stenosis, and reconstructing the right ventricular outflow tract." Maya nodded, trying to focus on the medical explanations rather than the growing panic in her chest. "The surgery will take approximately 6 to 8 hours. You'll wake up in the cardiac intensive care unit, probably feeling confused and uncomfortable. That's completely normal. Having family there when you wake up really helps with the disorientation and anxiety." "They'll be here," Maya said quietly, though she had stopped checking her phone for updates from her family members. Dr. Foster studied Maya's face with the practiced eye of someone who had seen hundreds of patients face major surgery.
Maya, I need to ask, do you have anyone else, a close friend perhaps? Sometimes family members get overwhelmed by medical situations, and it can be helpful to have multiple support people. Maya thought about Sarah from work, about Jennifer, about her other college friends who had gradually drifted away as Maya had become increasingly absorbed in her family's demands and needs. She realized with startling clarity that she had put all her emotional eggs in one basket, and that basket was currently scattered across Columbus, Ohio, pursuing other priorities. "No," Maya admitted. "It's just my family." At 7:45 a.m., a nurse named Tom arrived with a gurney. He was a tall, gentle man with kind eyes and a reassuring presence that Maya found comforting. "Ready for your big day, Maya?" he asked, helping her transfer from the hospital bed to the gurney. As they rolled through the hospital corridors toward the operating room, Maya caught glimpses of other patients surrounded by worried family members, of waiting rooms filled with people holding vigil for their loved ones. The contrast between their situations and her own was stark and heartbreaking. Just before they reached the operating room doors, Maya's phone buzzed one final time. 4 messages had arrived simultaneously. "Patricia, surgery going to run later than expected. We'll be there this afternoon. You're strong. You can do this." "Robert, still dealing with this pipe situation. Might not make it until evening. Proud of you, kiddo." "Jake, deposition going into overtime. Courthouse doesn't have good cell service. Text me when you're awake." "Clody, interview went amazing, but now they want to do the second round today. This could change everything. Love you." Maya stared at the messages as Tom paused the gurney outside the operating room. Each text was carefully worded to sound supportive while simultaneously explaining why work was more important than being present for her surgery. The final blow came in the form of what wasn't said. Not one family member had asked her to call them when she got to the hospital. Not one had inquired about her fears or offered specific comfort. Not one had acknowledged the magnitude of what she was facing alone. "Everything okay?" Tom asked, noticing her expression. Maya deleted the messages and turned off her phone. "Yes," she said, and for the first time in hours, it wasn't entirely a lie. Something had shifted inside her during the reading of those texts. A recognition that her family's absence wasn't just about conflicting schedules or poor timing. It was about fundamental differences in values and priorities that Maya had spent 24 years trying to ignore. The anesthesia mask was placed over her face, and as Maya drifted into unconsciousness, her last coherent thought wasn't about her family or their absence. It was about the possibility that waking up alone might be the beginning of learning how to be enough for herself.
Consciousness returned to Maya in fragments. First, the antiseptic smell of the hospital, then the rhythmic beeping of machines, followed by a burning sensation in her throat and chest that felt like someone had set her ribcage on fire. Her eyes fluttered open to harsh fluorescent lighting and the blurred shapes of medical equipment surrounding her bed. "Maya, can you hear me? You're in recovery. The surgery went very well." The voice belonged to Dr. Foster, who appeared at Maya's bedside with a warm smile and a tablet in her hands. Maya tried to speak, but could only manage a hoarse croak around the breathing tube that was still in her throat. "Don't try to talk yet," Dr. Foster said gently. "We'll remove the breathing tube in about an hour, once we're sure you're fully stable. Your surgery took 7 hours, but we were able to repair all 4 defects. Your heart is going to function normally now." Maya's eyes darted around the cardiac intensive care unit, searching for familiar faces. The room was filled with the quiet bustle of nurses checking monitors and adjusting IV lines, but there were no family members holding vigil by her bedside. No flowers, no balloons, no concerned relatives pacing nervously in the hallway. Dr. Foster followed her gaze, and her expression softened with understanding. "Your family called around noon asking for updates. We told them the surgery was going well, but would take longer than expected. They said they'd be here later today.
Maya closed her eyes, feeling a crushing weight that had nothing to do with her post-surgical pain. Even after 7 hours of life-saving surgery, even after she had made it through the most dangerous part, her family was still somewhere else, still prioritizing other commitments. The next few hours passed in a haze of medication adjustments, vital sign checks, and the gradual removal of various tubes and monitoring devices. Maya found herself paying attention to the hospital staff in a way she never had before. These strangers were providing her with more attentive care and genuine concern than her own family had shown in weeks. Her primary nurse was a woman named Diana Morales, a 15-year veteran of the cardiac unit who had a gift for combining professional competence with motherly warmth. Diana checked on Maya every 30 minutes, explaining each procedure and medication, adjusting her pillows and offering ice chips when Maya's throat was finally clear enough to swallow. "First heart surgery?" Diana asked while checking Maya's incision site. Maya nodded weakly. "It's scary, I know, but Dr. Foster is one of the best cardiac surgeons in the state. You're going to feel much better in a few days, and in a few weeks you'll have energy you haven't felt in years." "When," Maya's voice was barely a whisper, "when can I have visitors?" Diana glanced at the clock on the wall. "Visiting hours are already open. Family can come anytime in the ICU. Close friends can visit during regular hours, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. It was 4:30 p.m. Maya had been out of surgery for hours, and still no one had come. Around 6 p.m., Maya's phone finally rang. It was her mother. "Maya, sweetheart, how are you feeling? We've been so worried." Maya struggled to sit up slightly, wincing at the pull of her surgical incisions. "I'm okay. Sore." "I'm sure you are, honey. The doctor said the surgery went perfectly, which is such a relief. I've been in meetings all day but kept checking for updates. Are you coming to see me?" Maya asked, hating how small and needy her voice sounded. There was a slight pause. "Well, that's the thing. This Tokyo deal is more complicated than we thought, and I need to be here for a few more hours. But I'll definitely be there tomorrow morning, first thing." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Mom, I just had my chest cut open. I'm scared and I'm in pain, and I don't understand why work is more important than—" "Maya, that's not fair," Patricia interrupted, her tone becoming defensive. "This deal could mean a promotion to regional director. It's not just about today. It's about securing our family's future. You're young and healthy now. You'll recover, but opportunities like this don't come along often." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Patricia explaining the importance of her work while Maya listened in growing disbelief. When they hung up, Maya felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Similar conversations followed with the rest of her family. Robert called at 7 p.m. from the construction site, explaining that the pipe emergency had turned into a full system failure that required his immediate attention. Jake texted that his deposition had extended into the evening and he wouldn't be able to visit until the next day. Chloe called excitedly to report that her interview had led to a second interview, then a dinner meeting with potential mentors, and she was so close to landing this amazing opportunity. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Brief concern for Maya's welfare, followed by detailed explanations of why their work obligations took precedence over visiting her in the hospital. Each family member seemed genuinely convinced that their excuse was reasonable, even necessary. As evening visiting hours came to an end, and Maya watched other patients' families reluctantly leave their loved ones for the night, she had a profound realization about the nature of love and priority. Her family loved her, but their love was conditional and convenient. It existed when it didn't conflict with their professional ambitions or personal goals. Diana Morales noticed Maya's distress during the 8 p.m. medication round. She asked, settling into the chair beside Maya's bed with a gentleness that spoke of years of experience with patients facing difficult family situations. "Rough day?" "My family didn't come," Maya said simply, surprising herself with her directness. Diana nodded knowingly. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've learned that medical emergencies have a way of showing people's true priorities. Sometimes families surprise you in wonderful ways. Sometimes they disappoint you in ways that change everything." "I keep making excuses for them," Maya admitted, telling myself that their work really is that important, that they really can't get away. "Can I tell you something I've observed?" Diana asked. "In all my years here, I've seen CEOs leave board meetings, Construction workers walk off job sites, lawyers abandon court cases, and college students skip final exams to be with family members having surgery. When people want to be somewhere, they find a way.
The words hit Maya like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were undeniably true. She thought about her colleague Sarah, who had dropped everything to drive her to the emergency room. Sarah had rearranged client meetings and worked late to cover Maya's projects without being asked. A work acquaintance had shown more immediate care and sacrifice than Maya's own family. That night, alone in the ICU, with only the sounds of medical equipment and the distant murmur of nurses at their station, Maya began to confront some uncomfortable truths about the family dynamics she had accepted her entire life. She realized that her role as the family glue had actually been the role of the family giver, always providing support, organization, and sacrifice without expecting anything in return. She thought about all the times she had dropped her own plans to help her family. The art class she had quit to help her mother prepare for a promotion interview. The weekend trips with friends she had canceled to help Jake study for the bar exam. The date she had stood up to drive Chloe to a job interview when her car wouldn't start. In every case, her family had accepted her sacrifices as natural and expected, never questioning whether she might have her own important commitments or desires. But when the situation was reversed, when she needed them to sacrifice for her, suddenly work became paramount and her needs became negotiable. The next morning brought Dr. Foster's rounds and more positive news about Maya's recovery. Her heart was functioning beautifully, her incisions were healing well, and she would likely be moved out of the ICU by the afternoon. "You'll probably go home in 3 or 4 days," Dr. Foster said, reviewing Maya's chart. "Do you have family who can stay with you during the first week of recovery? You shouldn't be alone, and you'll need help with basic activities." Maya's stomach dropped. In all her worry about the surgery itself, she hadn't fully considered the recovery period. Of course she would need help. She couldn't lift anything over 5 pounds, couldn't drive, would need assistance with everything from cooking to getting dressed. I'm sure my family will help," Maya said, but even as she spoke the words, she doubted them. Dr. Foster studied Maya's face with the same perceptive concern she had shown before the surgery. "Maya, I'm going to be direct with you. Post-surgical recovery is just as important as the surgery itself. You need consistent, reliable care. If your family situation is complicated, we have resources, social workers who can help arrange home health aides, support groups for patients without strong family support." The phrase, "patients without strong family support," echoed in Maya's mind long after Dr. Foster left. It was a clinical way of describing something Maya was only beginning to acknowledge. Her family support system was largely illusory. Around 10 a.m., as Maya was moved from the ICU to a regular cardiac recovery room, she received a flurry of text messages from her family members. Each one expressed relief about her successful surgery and promised to visit soon, but none provided specific times or commitments. Her new room was in the cardiac wing's recovery unit, and Maya's roommate was a 78-year-old woman named Grace Patterson, who had undergone a valve replacement. Grace's side of the room was once again filled with evidence of a loving, attentive family, fresh flowers, homemade cookies, and a steady stream of visitors who took shifts staying with her. "First day out of intensive care?" Grace asked kindly, noticing Maya's slow, careful movements as she settled into her bed. "Yes. How did you know?" Grace smiled. You have that lost look. It's overwhelming at first, but you'll feel stronger each day. Are your people coming to see you today?" Maya hesitated. "I hope so." "Well, if they don't show up soon, you can share mine," said Grace with a wink. "I've got more family than I know what to do with. My granddaughter Lisa is about your age. She's a teacher. She'll be here around lunchtime. She could use a friend who understands what it's like to have a fixed heart." The generosity of the offer, coming from a stranger, highlighted the absence of similar generosity from Maya's own family. Here was an elderly woman she had known for less than an hour,
offering to share her family's love and support with someone who clearly needed it. Maya spent the morning reflecting on Grace's casual kindness and Diana's observations from the previous evening. She began to see her situation not as a temporary disappointment, but as a revelation about the fundamental nature of her family relationships. Around noon, when visiting hours opened and Maya watched Grace's family arrive with lunch, flowers, and stories to share, she made a decision that would define the next phase of her life. She was going to stop waiting for her family to prioritize her and start learning how to prioritize herself. The first step was acknowledging that their absence wasn't about bad timing or work emergencies. It was about choice, and they had chosen not to be there when she needed them most. The second step would be figuring out how to build a life that didn't revolve around earning love through constant giving and sacrifice. As Maya watched Grace's granddaughter Lisa arrive with homemade soup and a bag of books, she realized that love, real love, shouldn't have to be earned through usefulness. It should be freely given, especially during times of vulnerability and need. For the first time in her 24 years, Maya began to imagine what it might feel like to be someone's priority rather than someone's convenience.
By Maya's third day in the hospital, the absence of her family had become a tangible presence in the room. While Grace Patterson's bedside overflowed with get-well cards, fresh flowers, and a rotating cast of devoted relatives, Maya's side remained starkly empty, except for the single plant Sarah from work had sent with a note. Thinking of you. Take all the time you need to heal. The contrast became even more pronounced when Dr. Foster arrived for morning rounds with concerning news about Maya's discharge planning. Your recovery is progressing beautifully, Dr. Foster said, reviewing Maya's latest test results. Your heart function is excellent and your incisions are healing well. However, we need to discuss your post-surgical care plan. Maya felt her stomach tighten. She had been dreading this conversation since her family's continued absence had made their priorities crystal clear. The thing is, Dr. Foster continued, cardiac surgery recovery isn't just about the physical healing. You'll need assistance with daily activities for at least 2 weeks. No lifting over 5 pounds, no driving, no reaching above your shoulders. You'll need someone to help with cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and getting to your follow-up appointments. I understand, Maya said quietly. Have you been able to coordinate care with your family? Maya had tried. She had sent a group text to her family 2 days earlier explaining her care needs and asking who could help. The responses had been a masterclass in creative avoidance. Patricia had replied that she was leaving for a week-long conference in Chicago the day after Maya's discharge, essential for the promotion, she had written, but I'm sure the others can help. Robert had explained that the Henderson project was entering a critical phase, and he couldn't take time off without risking the entire contract. Maybe Chloe can stay with you, he had suggested. Jake had been more direct. I'm in the middle of 3 major cases. Can't you hire someone? I could pitch in for a home health aide. Chloe's response had been the most painful. I got the internship. I start Monday, and they said first impressions are everything. Can't miss any days in the first month. Maybe we can find you a nurse. Each family member had effectively passed the responsibility to someone else, creating a circle of deflection that left Maya exactly where she started, alone and in need of care that none of them were willing to provide. Dr. Foster, Maya said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest, I need to be honest. My family isn't available to help with my recovery. Dr. Foster set down her tablet and gave Maya her full attention. This conversation was clearly familiar territory for the experienced surgeon. That puts us in a difficult position, Dr. Foster said gently. I can't in good conscience discharge you to an empty house where you'll be struggling alone. We have a few options. She explained that Maya could either extend her hospital stay until she was more independent, arrange for professional home health care, or identify alternative support people who could assist during her recovery. The extended stay would be covered by insurance, since it's medically necessary,
But honestly, Maya, recovering at home is usually better for patients psychologically. Being in familiar surroundings, having some control over your environment, it makes a significant difference. Maya found herself thinking about Grace's granddaughter Lisa, who had visited twice more since their first meeting. Lisa was a third-grade teacher who had taken a week off from school specifically to help with her grandmother's recovery. She had arranged for substitute teachers, rescheduled parent conferences, and put her own life on hold without a single complaint. "What would you do if you were me?" Maya asked Dr. Foster. Dr. Foster considered the question carefully. "If I were you, I'd think seriously about what this situation is teaching you about the people in your life. Medical crises have a way of clarifying relationships. They show you who shows up and who makes excuses." That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Sarah Chen from work appeared in the doorway carrying a large basket filled with books, magazines, herbal teas, and homemade cookies. "Sarah," Maya's face lit up with genuine joy for the first time in days. "You didn't have to come." "Of course I did," Sarah said, settling into the chair beside Maya's bed. "How are you feeling? Really feeling?" Sarah's direct question and concerned expression opened a floodgate Maya didn't realize she was holding back. For the first time since her surgery, she told someone the complete truth about her family's absence, their excuses, and her growing realization about the one-sided nature of their relationships. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to anger to protective concern. "Maya," Sarah said when Maya finished her account, "what your family is doing isn't normal. When my brother had his appendix out last year, our entire extended family rearranged their schedules. My mom took 2 weeks off work, my dad drove up from Cincinnati, and I used all my vacation days. That's what families do."
But their careers are important, Maya said, surprised to find herself still defending them. "My mom's up for a promotion. Jake's trying to make partner." "So what?" Sarah interrupted. "Maya, you could have died. You had major heart surgery. There is no career obligation that supersedes that. None." Sarah's blunt assessment forced Maya to confront something she had been avoiding. Her family's behavior wasn't just disappointing or poorly timed, it was fundamentally wrong. "I keep thinking I'm being too needy," Maya admitted. "Maybe I'm expecting too much." "You're expecting basic human decency," Sarah said firmly. "You're expecting the same level of care and sacrifice that you've given them for years." Sarah stayed for 3 hours, sharing workplace gossip, discussing Maya's favorite books, and helping her navigate the hospital's meal options. When visiting hours ended, she squeezed Maya's hand and made a promise that would prove to be a turning point. "Maya, I know we're just work friends, but I want you to know, if you need help during your recovery, I'm here. I can take some time off, help with grocery shopping, drive you to appointments. You don't have to do this alone." After Sarah left, Maya lay in her hospital bed staring at the ceiling and processing the stark contrast between her colleagues' immediate offer of support and her family's elaborate explanations for why they couldn't help. The next morning brought a visit from the hospital's social worker, Janet Rodriguez, a warm woman in her 50s who specialized in helping patients navigate complex family situations. "Dr. Foster asked me to stop by," Janet explained. "She's concerned about your discharge planning and wanted to make sure you have all your options." Janet outlined several possibilities: professional home health aides who could provide daily assistance, a transitional care facility where Maya could recover with medical supervision, or a volunteer companion program that matched recovering patients with community volunteers. "What would you recommend?" Maya asked. "Honestly, I'd recommend taking a hard look at the relationships in your life," Janet said. "I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I've seen too many people exhaust themselves trying to maintain connections with family members who don't reciprocate care and support." Janet shared stories of other patients who had used medical crises as opportunities to reshape their support systems, building chosen families of friends, colleagues, and community members who showed up consistently and reliably. The goal isn't to punish your family or cut them off completely. The goal is to stop expecting from them what they've clearly shown they're not willing or able to give, and start building relationships with people who can and will prioritize your well-being. That evening, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She called Sarah and accepted her offer of help during recovery. Then she researched the volunteer companion program and signed up to be matched with someone for additional support. Finally, she composed a group text to her family. "Thank you all for your concern about my surgery. I'm recovering well and will be discharged tomorrow. I've arranged for care during my recovery period, so you don't need to worry about adjusting your work schedules. I understand that your careers are your priority right now." The responses came quickly. "Oh, good. I was so worried about leaving for Chicago. I knew you'd figure something out." "Glad you're being responsible about getting help. Focus on healing up." "Smart thinking. Professional care is probably better anyway." "Perfect. Now I don't have to stress about letting down my new bosses. Love you." Each response confirmed what Maya had suspected. Her family was relieved to be freed from the obligation of caring for her. They had never intended to rearrange their lives to help her recover. They had been waiting for her to solve the problem herself, just as she had always solved problems for them. But something had shifted in Maya during her hospital stay. The combination of physical healing and emotional awakening had given her a new perspective on her worth and her relationships. She was beginning to understand that love wasn't supposed to be a one-way transaction. Grace Patterson, who had been quietly observing Maya's situation from the next bed, offered some unexpected wisdom as they both prepared for discharge the following day. "You know, dear," Grace said, "sometimes the best thing that can happen to a person is learning they can survive without the people they thought they couldn't live without." "Is that what happened to me?" Maya asked. Grace smiled knowingly. "I think what happened to you is you discovered you're stronger than you knew. And sometimes that discovery requires other people to step back so you can step forward." As Maya packed her few belongings and prepared to leave the hospital, she felt an unexpected emotion alongside her nervousness about recovery. Excitement. For the first time in her adult life, she was about to experience what it felt like to be cared for by people who had chosen to prioritize her well-being. She was also about to discover what it felt like to stop organizing her entire life around people who took her devotion for granted. The challenges ahead would test her resolve and force her to rebuild her understanding of family, love, and self-worth. But Maya was beginning to realize that some challenges were actually opportunities in disguise. Opportunities to become the person she was meant to be, rather than the person her family had conditioned her to be.
Maya's first week of recovery at home became a revelation that fundamentally altered her understanding of what care and support could look like. Her small apartment on Chestnut Avenue, which she had rented 6 months earlier in a moment of independence that her family had questioned as unnecessary, became the sanctuary where she would rebuild not just her physical strength, but her entire sense of self-worth. Sarah Chen had taken 3 days off work to help Maya settle in after discharge, transforming the simple one-bedroom apartment into a recovery haven. She had stocked the refrigerator with easy-to-prepare meals, arranged Maya's medications in clearly labeled containers, and even brought over a small bell for Maya to ring if she needed assistance during the night. "This feels like too much," Maya protested as Sarah fluffed pillows and adjusted the living room setup so Maya could rest comfortably while watching television. "This is what friends do," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "This is normal, Maya. What's not normal is what your family is doing." The volunteer companion program had matched Maya with a retired nurse named Margaret Foster, no relation to Dr. Foster, as they had laughed about during their first meeting.
Margaret was a 72-year-old widow who had lost her husband to heart disease 5 years earlier and now volunteered her time helping cardiac patients navigate their recovery. Margaret arrived each morning at 9 a.m. with the precision of someone who had spent 40 years in healthcare. She brought structure to Maya's days without being overbearing, helping with light housework, preparing nutritious meals, and providing the kind of experienced perspective that only came from decades of caring for others. Recovery isn't just about your body healing, Margaret explained as she helped Maya with gentle walking exercises around the apartment complex. It's about your spirit healing too. Sometimes surgery fixes more than just the physical problem. It gives you a chance to examine everything else that needs repairing. Margaret's words proved prophetic. As Maya's physical strength gradually returned, she found herself examining aspects of her life that had nothing to do with her heart defect. She began to see patterns in her family relationships that she had never noticed before, or had chosen to ignore. The most revealing moment came on her 4th day home when Maya received a phone call from her mother. Patricia was calling from Chicago, where she was attending her pharmaceutical conference. "Maya, how are you feeling, sweetheart? I've been thinking about you constantly." "I'm doing better, still sore, but getting stronger." "That's wonderful. Listen, I have the most exciting news. The presentation I gave yesterday went incredibly well. Mr. Henderson from corporate specifically mentioned that he was impressed with my initiative on this project. I think the promotion is really going to happen." Maya listened as her mother spent 20 minutes detailing her professional triumph, describing meetings, networking opportunities, and strategic career moves. It wasn't until the very end of the conversation that Patricia asked a single question about Maya's recovery. "So, you're managing okay on your own?" "Actually, Mom, I'm not on my own. Sarah from work has been helping me, and I'm matched with a volunteer companion named Margaret who comes every day." There was a brief pause. "Oh, well, that's good that you found help." Maya waited for her mother to ask about Sarah, about Margaret, about what kind of help she needed or how she was coping emotionally. Instead, Patricia moved on to more details about her conference schedule. After they hung up, Maya sat in her living room processing the conversation. Her mother hadn't asked about her pain levels, her mobility, her emotional state, or her fears about recovery. She hadn't inquired about the people who were caring for Maya or expressed gratitude toward them. She hadn't even asked when Maya's next doctor's appointment was scheduled. Instead, Patricia had used Maya's recovery period as an opportunity to share her own professional excitement with someone who was essentially a captive audience, too weak to leave, too polite to hang up, and too well trained in the family dynamic to redirect the conversation back to her own needs. The realization hit Maya with stunning clarity. Her family didn't just fail to prioritize her during her medical crisis. They actively used her as an emotional dumping ground for their own concerns and achievements, even during her most vulnerable moments. Similar patterns emerged in conversations with the rest of her family throughout that week. Robert called to complain about delays on the Henderson project, using Maya's sympathetic ear to vent his work frustrations without once asking how she was sleeping or whether her pain medication was working effectively. Jake sent long text messages about his legal cases, treating Maya like a sounding board for his professional anxieties while showing no interest in her recovery milestones. Chloe's calls were perhaps the most revealing. She would begin each conversation with a perfunctory, "How are you feeling?" before launching into detailed accounts of her internship experiences, her new colleagues, and her excitement about networking opportunities. When Maya tried to share her own concerns about returning to work or her fears about long-term cardiac health, Chloe would respond with distracted "mm-hms" before redirecting the conversation back to her own experiences. The contrast with Sarah's and Margaret's care became increasingly stark. Sarah called every evening specifically to check on Maya's comfort level, her emotional state, and her concerns about the next day. She asked detailed questions about Maya's symptoms, celebrated small victories like walking to the mailbox independently, and offered practical solutions for challenges Maya was facing.
Margaret's care was even more profound. She seemed to intuitively understand the emotional complexity of Maya's situation without needing detailed explanations. When Maya mentioned feeling guilty about not calling her family more often, Margaret sat down and had a conversation that changed everything. "Maya, can I tell you something I learned during my 40 years as a nurse?" Margaret asked, settling into the chair across from Maya's couch. "Guilt is often a signal that someone has trained you to feel responsible for their emotions and needs. Healthy relationships don't require guilt to maintain them." Margaret explained that during her decades of caring for patients, she had observed countless family dynamics during medical crises. The families that functioned well rallied around their sick member without being asked, without making the patient feel guilty for needing care, and without using the patient's vulnerability as an opportunity to focus on their own concerns. Your family is treating your recovery like an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a priority to be supported, Margaret observed gently. And they've trained you so well to accommodate their needs that you feel guilty for having needs of your own. This conversation prompted Maya to take an inventory of her family relationships that was both painful and liberating. She realized that every major event in her adult life had followed the same pattern. She provided support, organization, and sacrifice for her family's milestones, achievements, and crises, while her own significant moments were treated as secondary considerations. When Jake graduated from law school, Maya had organized the celebration dinner, managed the guest list, and spent weeks coordinating with relatives. When she graduated from college, her family had attended the ceremony, but spent the celebration dinner discussing Jake's upcoming bar exam. When Chloe needed help moving into her dormitory, Maya had taken time off work and spent an entire weekend helping her sister settle in. When Maya had moved into her apartment, she had hired movers and handled everything alone because her family had various work obligations. The pattern was so consistent and so deeply ingrained that Maya had never questioned it. She had accepted her role as the family's support system while never expecting them to provide support in return. But now, experiencing what genuine care looked like through Sarah's friendship and Margaret's volunteer service, Maya could see the dysfunction clearly. She was witnessing what it meant to be someone's priority rather than someone's convenience, and the difference was transformative. On her 7th day home, Maya made a decision that marked the true turning point of her recovery. She decided to test her family's capacity for genuine support by asking for something she actually needed rather than something that would make their lives easier. Maya's follow-up appointment with Dr. Foster was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. She would need a ride to the hospital since she couldn't drive yet, and Dr. Foster had recommended that someone accompany her to help remember post-surgical instructions and ask relevant questions. Instead of arranging alternative transportation as she normally would to avoid inconveniencing her family, Maya decided to ask directly for what she needed. She sent a group text. "I have my follow-up appointment with Dr. Foster on Monday at 10 a.m. I need someone to drive me and come into the appointment with me. It's important for my recovery. Can anyone help?" The responses revealed everything Maya needed to know about her family's true priorities. "Patricia, Monday? That's my first day back from Chicago, and I have back-to-back meetings to catch up on. Can you reschedule?" "Robert, Monday's the concrete pour for Henderson project. Been scheduled for weeks, critical timeline." "Jake, court appearance Monday morning. Can't miss it. Maybe Tuesday?" "Chloe, Monday is my presentation to the senior partners. I've been preparing for weeks. This could determine my whole future at the firm." Maya stared at the responses, feeling a mixture of hurt and clarity. Each family member had legitimate professional obligations, but their immediate instinct was to ask her to accommodate their schedules rather than finding ways to accommodate hers. More telling was what none of them had done. No one had asked if the appointment could be rescheduled for medical reasons, no one had offered to help find alternative transportation, and no one had expressed concern about Maya attending this crucial appointment alone. Sarah's response came within minutes of Maya mentioning the situation to her. "Of course I'll take you. I'll request the morning off. What time should I pick you up?" As Maya fell asleep that night,
she understood that her heart surgery had repaired more than just a physical defect. It had revealed the true condition of her family relationships and given her the clarity to begin making different choices about where to invest her emotional energy. The turning point wasn't just about recognizing her family's limitations, it was about recognizing her own worth and her right to expect the same level of care and consideration she had always provided to others.
Maya's follow-up appointment with Dr. Foster became a celebration of more than just her physical recovery. As Sarah sat beside her in the cardiac clinic, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions about Maya's long-term health, Maya experienced something she had never felt before: the security of having someone genuinely invested in her well-being without expecting anything in return. Dr. Foster's examination revealed remarkable progress. Maya's heart function was excellent, her surgical sites were healing beautifully, and her exercise tolerance was already improving beyond what she had experienced before surgery. "Maya, your recovery is exceptional," Dr. Foster said, reviewing the latest echocardiogram results. "Your heart is functioning better now than it probably has your entire life. You should feel proud of how well you've taken care of yourself during this process." "I couldn't have done it without help," Maya replied, glancing gratefully at Sarah, who had rearranged her entire work schedule to be there. Dr. Foster noticed the dynamic between the two women and smiled. "Good support systems make all the difference in recovery outcomes. Maya, you're cleared to return to work part-time next week if you feel ready, and full-time in another 2 weeks. You can start driving again, and we'll gradually increase your activity restrictions." As they left the hospital, Sarah suggested celebrating at Maya's favorite cafe, a small place called The Grind near downtown Columbus that served excellent coffee and homemade pastries. It was a simple gesture, but one that marked a significant shift in Maya's life experience. "I can't remember the last time someone offered to celebrate good news with me," Maya admitted, as they settled into a corner booth with their drinks. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. Maya thought about her family's typical response to her achievements or milestones. When she had received her promotion to senior graphic designer the previous year, she had called her family excitedly to share the news. Her mother had congratulated her briefly before explaining that she couldn't talk long because she was preparing for an important client call. Her father had said he was proud, but then immediately asked if Maya could help him organize his tax documents that weekend. Jake had responded with advice about negotiating better benefits, and Chloe had used the conversation as an opportunity to complain about her own job search struggles. "My family doesn't really celebrate my good news," Maya explained. "They acknowledge it, but then the conversation always shifts to their own concerns, or they find ways to make it about how I can help them." Sarah looked genuinely shocked. "Maya, that's not normal family behavior. When my sister got promoted last year, we threw her a surprise party. When my cousin finished her master's degree, the whole family went out for dinner. Celebrating each other's successes is what families do." This conversation led to Maya sharing more about her family dynamics with Sarah, who listened with growing concern and occasional expressions of disbelief. Sarah's reactions helped Maya understand just how far from normal her family relationships actually were. "Maya, can I ask you something?" Sarah said carefully. "When was the last time one of your family members did something specifically to make your life easier or better, without you asking and without expecting anything in return?" Maya considered the question for several minutes, searching her memory for examples. She came up empty. "I honestly can't think of anything," she admitted. "But I bet you can think of dozens of examples of you doing that for them," Sarah observed. Maya nodded, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent surgery. That afternoon, Maya made a decision that would prove pivotal in her transformation. She decided to start a journal, documenting her recovery process, but also tracking her family interactions and her own emotional responses to them. Margaret had suggested this during one of their conversations, explaining that writing things down often revealed patterns that were invisible when events happened in isolation.
Maya's first journal entry was brutally honest. Day 12 post-surgery. I'm physically stronger than I've been in months, maybe years. Dr. Foster says my heart function is excellent, but I'm also emotionally exhausted from trying to maintain relationships with people who don't seem to value my well-being. Sarah took a half day off work to drive me to my appointment and celebrate good news with me. My own family couldn't spare 2 hours for my follow-up appointment. The contrast is devastating and clarifying. I keep waiting for them to ask how I'm really doing, to show curiosity about my recovery, to express gratitude to the people who are caring for me. Instead, every conversation is about their work stress, their achievements, their concerns. I'm realizing that I've been a supporting character in their stories, never the protagonist of my own. Writing these thoughts down gave Maya a new perspective on her situation. She began to see her family's behavior not as a temporary disappointment related to bad timing, but as a consistent pattern of prioritizing their own needs while taking her support for granted. The next week, as Maya gradually returned to normal activities, she tested this new perspective by changing how she responded to her family's communications. Instead of immediately offering solutions to their problems or celebrating their achievements, she focused on sharing her own experiences and needs.
The results were revealing. When her mother called to complain about challenges with the Chicago contract implementation, Maya responded by talking about her own return to work and the adjustments she was making to accommodate her recovery needs. Patricia listened politely but seemed uncomfortable with the shift in conversational focus and ended the call more quickly than usual. When Jake texted about winning a difficult case, instead of congratulating him extensively and asking about details, Maya simply responded, "That's great," and then shared news about her improved energy levels and her plans to start attending a cardiac rehabilitation program. Jake's response was telling. "Good for you. Listen, can you help me research some precedents for my next case? I'm swamped." Even during Maya's recovery from major surgery, Jake's instinct was to ask her for work assistance rather than offering support for her rehabilitation. Maya's most significant breakthrough came during a video call with Chloe, who wanted to share details about her internship success and her growing confidence that she would receive a full-time job offer. "That sounds like a great opportunity," Maya said genuinely. "I'm happy things are working out for you." "Thanks. So what have you been up to? Besides recovering, I mean." Maya took a deep breath and decided to share something meaningful about her experience. "Actually, I've been learning a lot about myself during this recovery. I'm realizing that I've spent most of my adult life organizing my priorities around other people's needs, and I'm starting to think about what I want for my own life." There was a pause before Chloe responded. "That's deep. So anyway, let me tell you about this amazing project I'm working on." Chloe had immediately deflected from Maya's attempt to share something personal and meaningful, redirecting the conversation back to her own experiences. Maya realized that her family not only failed to prioritize her needs, they were actively uncomfortable when she tried to make herself the focus of conversation. This pattern became clearer as Maya continued her journaling and her experimentation with different communication approaches. Her family was comfortable with her in the role of supporter, organizer, and problem solver. They were deeply uncomfortable when she tried to be the one needing or deserving attention, support, or celebration. Margaret helped Maya understand the psychological dynamics at play during one of their afternoon walks around the apartment complex. "Your family has what I call role rigidity," Margaret explained as they paused to rest on a bench overlooking the small pond in the center of the complex. "They've assigned you the role of the giver, and they've assigned themselves the role of receivers. When you try to step out of that role, it threatens the entire family system." "So they're not going to change?" Maya asked. "They might, eventually, if you maintain firm boundaries and refuse to go back to the old pattern, but more likely they'll resist and try to pull you back into your familiar role. Change is threatening to people who benefit from the status quo." Margaret's words proved prophetic.
As Maya continued to establish different patterns in her family relationships, focusing conversations on her own needs, declining requests that would compromise her recovery, and expecting reciprocal interest in her life, her family's responses became increasingly resistant. Her mother became more insistent about needing Maya's help with work projects, framing these requests as urgent family obligations. Her father started calling her selfish when she declined to help with household tasks that would strain her recovering body. Jake became impatient when Maya didn't immediately respond to his requests for research assistance, accusing her of playing up her surgery for attention. Chloe's response was perhaps the most hurtful. During a phone conversation where Maya tried to share her excitement about returning to work and her plans to pursue some professional development opportunities she had been considering, Maya interrupted impatiently. "Maya, you're being kind of self-absorbed lately. Everything is about you and your recovery and your future plans. What about what the rest of us are dealing with?" The accusation stung because it was so fundamentally unfair. Maya had spent 24 years making everything about what her family was dealing with. The moment she tried to make her own recovery and future plans a priority, she was accused of being self-absorbed. But instead of falling back into her old pattern of apologizing and refocusing on Chloe's concerns, Maya felt a surge of clarity and strength. "Chloe, I just had major heart surgery 3 weeks ago. I think it's reasonable for my recovery and future health to be a priority in my life right now." "Fine, but you don't have to be so dramatic about everything." After that conversation, Maya sat in her apartment and realized that she had reached a point of no return. She could either go back to her old role as the family's support system, accepting crumbs of attention and care while providing unlimited service to others, or she could continue moving forward into a life where her own needs and well-being were genuinely prioritized. The choice was clear, but making it would require courage she was still learning to access. Maya was about to discover that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and ultimately for others, is to refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns, even when that refusal is met with resistance and accusations. Her heart had been repaired, and now it was time to repair the rest of her life.
6 months after her heart surgery, Maya Richardson stood in her new office space, a bright, modern co-working facility downtown where she had launched her own graphic design consultancy. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as she reviewed client proposals for her growing business, a steaming cup of coffee at her elbow and a sense of contentment in her chest that had nothing to do with her now perfectly functioning heart. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. The months following her surgery had been a careful process of reconstruction, not just of her physical strength, but of her entire understanding of relationships, self-worth, and what it meant to build a life on her own terms. The first major milestone had come 2 months post-surgery, when Maya made the decision to move out of Columbus entirely. The apartment on Chestnut Avenue, which had been her recovery sanctuary, had served its purpose, but Maya realized that truly changing her life would require more than just changing her behavior. It would require changing her environment and her daily proximity to the family dynamics that had shaped her for so long. She had chosen Portland, Oregon after researching cities with thriving creative industries and strong communities of independent professionals. It was far enough from Ohio to require intentional effort for family visits, but close enough to feel like a reasonable distance rather than a dramatic escape. Margaret had been instrumental in helping Maya plan the move. The volunteer companion program had officially ended after Maya's 6-week recovery period, but Margaret had become a genuine friend and mentor. She had helped Maya research neighborhoods, connected her with a real estate agent in Portland, and most importantly, had provided emotional support during the inevitable family confrontations that arose when Maya announced her plans. The family meeting where Maya revealed her decision to relocate had been one of the most difficult conversations of her life, but also one of the most liberating. She had invited everyone to Sunday dinner at her apartment, a dinner she had prepared herself without asking for anyone's help, and had waited until dessert to share her news. "I've decided to move to Portland in 2 months," she had said simply, watching their faces carefully. I've accepted a position with a design agency there, and I'm excited about the opportunity. The responses had been exactly what Maya had come to expect, but her new perspective allowed her to see them clearly rather than getting caught up in the emotional manipulation. Patricia had immediately made it about her own needs. "Maya, you can't leave now. I'm up for regional director, and I'll need help managing the transition. Who's going to organize family events?" Robert had been more direct. "This is selfish. Family sticks together. You're abandoning your responsibilities." Jake had tried a different approach. "This seems like a hasty decision made while you're still emotional from surgery. Maybe you should wait a year and think it through." Chloe had been the most revealing. "What am I supposed to do when I need help with things? You've always been there for me. This feels like betrayal." Maya had listened to each response with remarkable calm, recognizing the patterns she had spent months learning to identify. Each family member was focused on how her decision affected them, not on what might be best for her health, happiness, or professional growth. Not one of them had asked about her new job, her excitement about the opportunity, or her feelings about starting fresh in a new city. "I understand that my moving will require adjustments for all of you, but this is the right decision for my life and my future. Your future is here with your family," Patricia had insisted. That statement had crystallized everything Maya had been learning about her family's definition of love and loyalty. To them, love meant sacrificing her own growth and opportunities to remain available for their convenience. It meant organizing her entire life around their needs while expecting nothing in return. "Mom," Maya had said gently but firmly, "my future is wherever I can build a life that fulfills me and allows me to grow. That place isn't here." The conversation had continued for another hour, with her family cycling through various strategies: guilt, anger, bargaining, and finally, cold withdrawal. By the end of the evening, it was clear that they viewed her decision as a personal betrayal, rather than a healthy choice for an adult woman pursuing her own goals. But Maya had also discovered something remarkable during that confrontation. She no longer needed their approval or understanding to make decisions about her own life. Their disappointment and anger couldn't touch the core of strength she had developed during her recovery. The move to Portland had been facilitated by an unexpected network of support. Sarah had taken vacation time to help Maya pack and driven with her across the country, turning the relocation into an adventure rather than a lonely exile. Margaret had connected Maya with her niece who lived in Portland, providing an instant local connection. Even some of Maya's work colleagues had provided references and networking contacts in her new city. Maya's family had not offered to help with the move. They had maintained their stance that she was making a mistake and that helping her would be enabling poor judgment. Maya hired professional movers and handled the logistics herself, but she had been surrounded by chosen family that celebrated her courage rather than criticized her choices. The new job in Portland had been everything Maya had hoped for and more. The design agency specialized in working with nonprofit organizations and social impact companies, clients whose missions resonated with Maya's growing sense of purpose. Her colleagues were collaborative rather than competitive, and her boss, Elena Martinez, had a management style that encouraged professional development and work-life balance. "We hired you because of your talent and your vision," Elena had told Maya during her 3-month review, "but I have to say, your perspective and creative problem solving have exceeded our expectations. You bring something special to our team." Maya had also discovered what it felt like to have colleagues who cared about her well-being. When she had mentioned her cardiac history during a team health insurance discussion, her coworkers had immediately asked thoughtful questions about her needs and had been supportive of her attending regular cardiology appointments. Nobody had made her feel guilty for prioritizing her health or suggested that her medical history was an inconvenience. The contrast with her family's approach to her health needs couldn't have been more stark. Maya's personal life had flourished as well. She had joined a hiking group for young professionals, started taking pottery classes at a local studio, and had even begun dating someone she met through her volunteer work with a cardiac patient support group. David was a software engineer who had undergone his own heart surgery as a teenager and understood the unique perspective that came from surviving a major medical crisis.
"You know what I love about you?" David had said during one of their early dates as they walked along the Willamette River. You're genuinely present with people. You listen like you actually care about what they're saying. It's rare. Maya had laughed, thinking about how that quality had been simultaneously her greatest strength and her biggest vulnerability in her family relationships. "I'm learning to be more selective about who gets that attention," she had replied. Her relationship with David was teaching Maya what reciprocal care looked like in romantic partnership. When she had a minor cardiac episode, just some irregular heartbeats triggered by stress, nothing serious, David had immediately offered to drive her to the doctor and had researched stress management techniques to help her develop better coping strategies. He had cared for her needs without making her feel guilty for having them. Maya's family had maintained sporadic contact during her first months in Portland, but the conversations had remained frustratingly one-sided. They would call when they needed something, advice on a work project, help researching information, or someone to listen to their problems, but showed little genuine interest in her new life. When Maya shared exciting news about landing a major client or her growing friendship network, her family's responses were polite but brief. When she mentioned her relationship with David, Chloe had actually said, "I hope this guy isn't going to distract you from staying in touch with family." The comment had been so revealing of her family's mindset that Maya had almost laughed. Even her romantic happiness was framed as a potential threat to their access to her emotional labor. The final turning point in Maya's family relationships had come during the holidays. Her family had assumed she would return to Ohio for Christmas, despite the fact that she had been living in Portland for 4 months and had built a new life there. "We're expecting you home for Christmas," Patricia had announced during a November phone call. "I've already planned the menu around your favorite dishes." "Actually, Mom, I'm staying in Portland for Christmas. David and I are volunteering at a homeless shelter on Christmas Day, and I'm hosting a dinner for friends who can't travel home." The silence that followed was deafening. "Maya, you can't miss family Christmas. It's tradition." "I'm creating new traditions," Maya had replied simply. The conversation that followed had been painful but necessary. Her family had accused her of choosing strangers over family, of being selfish and ungrateful, of abandoning her roots and responsibilities. Maya had listened calmly and then had said something that marked her complete transformation. "I love all of you, but I'm not going to organize my life around your expectations anymore. I'm building a life that makes me happy and fulfilled, and I hope you can, eventually, support that choice." Maya had spent Christmas morning serving breakfast at the homeless shelter with David and a group of other volunteers, followed by an afternoon hosting dinner for 8 friends who had become her chosen family in Portland. It was the most meaningful Christmas she had ever experienced. As Maya now sat in her office, 6 months after the surgery that had changed everything, she reflected on the profound transformation that had taken place. Her heart was stronger than it had ever been, both physically and emotionally. She had built a life based on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared values rather than obligation and guilt. Her family relationships had evolved into something more honest, if less intensive. They spoke every few weeks, and Maya had learned to keep the conversations light and boundaried. She no longer tried to fix their problems or organize their lives, and she no longer expected them to prioritize her needs the way she had once prioritized theirs. "Some relationships improve when you establish boundaries," Margaret had told her during one of their regular phone calls. "Others reveal their true nature. Both outcomes are valuable information." Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, who was planning to visit Portland the following month. "Can't wait to see your new life in person. David sounds amazing, and I'm so proud of everything you've built." Maya smiled, thinking about how different this message was from her family's communications. Sarah celebrated Maya's happiness rather than resenting it. She was excited to meet David rather than viewing him as competition for Maya's attention. She was proud of Maya's achievements rather than threatened by them. Maya had learned that love, real love, wasn't about sacrifice and service and constant availability. It was about mutual respect, genuine care, and celebrating each other's growth and happiness. It was about showing up when someone needed you, not because they had earned it through usefulness, but because their well-being mattered to you. Her heart surgery had saved her life in ways that went far beyond a physical repair. It had taught her that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who need you to stay small and convenient. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for them, is to choose to grow beyond their limitations.
As Maya looked out at the bustling streets of Portland, at the life she had built with her own courage and determination, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for that terrifying morning when she had woken up alone in the hospital. That abandonment had been the beginning of her liberation. She had learned to be enough for herself, and in doing so, she had attracted people who saw her worth and wanted to celebrate it rather than exploit it. Her new heart had given her a new life in every sense of the word.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.